Hi everybody, Donna Salazar here for Gel Press. Today I have a technique video showing you how I made some texture twins. I use my embossing folders on my gel plates and they got very painty, like super thick with paint. So I used some low temperature hot glue and I was able to pull all of that paint off and I got a texture out of it, an impression that I was able to adhere to cardboard, and I used this to make more prints on my gel plate, and then I used those prints to make this box. And I'm going to show you how I did the texture twinning and the process for making the prints. So the most important thing before you start is to know that you have a really sturdy embossing plate. So my embossing plates are super thick and you can see how much paint had accumulated on them. And the second most important thing is that you use low temperature hot glue. So do not use something that's going to melt your embossing plate. The hot glue on low temperature, it's hot and it can, you know, sort of burn your hand, but it's not going to melt your embossing plate. And then what I did is I flipped it over on a nonstick mat, and then I used ice to cool the glue down enough so that it can pull off very easily. And I did that multiple times. And then I just hot glued those onto a piece of cardboard. And here I'm just going around the edges to make sure that everything is really stuck down well, because I don't want paint to get underneath the edges and then create like a lip that will, you know, make really weird prints. So after I made sure that everything was adhered down really well, then I'm cut it out. So I sped this up super fast because, you know, I'm just cutting out cardboard, but I guess it's important to mention that I'm using good scissors. So these are the Tim Holtz scissors from Tonic, and they're nice and sturdy for cardboard. And now we're going to play. So I'm using some Dina paints, and I have a secondary plate off to the side that I can pull extra prints from when I am playing. And so I start with a little bit of texture, just adding them in here. And when you do your pattern like I did on mine, it gives you a little bit more of an organic design, because you can see you can actually continue the pattern across, but then you don't have to have a full pattern. You can leave open edges on the sides or whatever. And I like to use different types of paint. So this paint is a little bit thinner. So mixing your paints gives you different textures on your prints. So I'm using a DecoArt fluid media paint, and then I kind of stick with the same color pattern throughout. And this is also a DecoArt fluid media, and I love these color combinations. Then I add in a lot of other textures as well. I'm not even sure where I got this. I think it was in some kind of packaging. And then I'm going to pull the first print. And I left all of this in. I could have cut it out, made the video really short, but I always want to emphasize to people how much I rub that back of the paper into the plate to make sure that it is really making some good contact with that paint, and it's going to pull up as much as possible, because I always use dirty plates. I always talk about using your plates dirty because I like getting all of that texture that's in the background. Now you'll notice, because this first print I haven't been playing on it a lot, so that paint that's left on there is still pretty dry. So it's going to take a little bit of playing before I'll be able to pull that stuff up, but that stuff on the left edge gives you that kind of distressed, torn paper, you know, aging paper kind of a look. But eventually I do want to pull some of that up. The thinner paints also don't pull up that kind of texture on your plate as much, so you end up having to use a thicker, more opaque paint to get that stuff up, and I do that at the end. So adding more of that fluid acrylic. Gonna add in more texture. On this one you can see the texture a little bit more as I'm taking the paint off of the plate. You could also see my sister's calling me on my Apple Watch. I call her after, don't worry. My sisters totally get it. I tell them, oh, I was just shooting a video, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, makes sense. And then I left that whole right side without texture because of the way that I created the twin, the texture twin. That was more fluid acrylic, so it's thinner, more transparent. And I do like the kind of prints that I get when I do that. Now this is a thicker paint, so now it's going to pull up more of what's on that background. Not quite as thick as the last print that I do. And I apologize for that light streak that's across the middle. I filmed this before I got my blackout curtains for my studio, so that light streak just keeps getting bigger and bigger across the middle. But this will be the last video that's like that because I have the blackout curtains now. And again, I'm going to rub that paper for a really long time to make sure that it is making really good contact with the paint. And you can feel, you'll get kind of a sixth sense almost of when it's ready to pull your paper up, because the texture almost changes on the paper. I love this print. It's hard to see because that light across the middle, but I really love that one. And then I do these kind of off to the side, but straight down the middle because I use those for layouts, because I love the way that it adds that little bit of kind of a mixed media feel, and then you can add whatever you want around it. Staying in that same color theme. And this is a lighter paint. This is where I go for the thicker paint because I've been playing long enough that I know that that paint off to the left, that big thick stuff, should come off if I use a thick paint. So now I'm going to completely cover it with a artist grade thick acrylic paint. So when I say artist grade, I don't mean like the super expensive paints. This is actually the Liquitex Basics. So it's a good quality, but it's not going to break the bank. And this is when you really, if you want to pick up big, thick, chunky bits of paint that have been on your plate for a while, you have to really, rub the back of that paper. And you can tell I'm rubbing hard because it's shaking the camera even. And there's some of that texture. And then that ended up on the top of the box right there, because I love that grungy texture so much. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.